Hi, I don't know how many people are watching on here, or where YouTube is. I don't know if I have a mod or anything. Let's see if I can. That's my you need to stand up and take a break sound, but well, this is a con, there ain't no breaks. So what I'm doing here is just kind of doing an initial sketch of a character head. Just kind of enough for me to know where my landmarks are going to be for this painting. This is a totally different skill set that I will not be covering. As you can see, I am trying to draw through. So basically like drawing a lot of these lines to figure out like where stuff is going to match up. So that like this point and this point are both um, level and even and following the way that this head turns that way. So this is my center line. So I'm trying to line up all the things that would be in the middle of your face, like the dip in your lips, or look at the bottom. And because these the eyeballs are spheres, you have the eyelid wrapping around it. It was big anime eyes, because why the heck not? So the eyebrow sits on top of the brow bone. It can be basically any shape. Then the dreaded flip horizontal. Let's see. More shape to that nose, fix up the perspective on it a bit. The ear is like totally off, as usual. Don't know if anybody's asking questions where I could be. I am in the Discord. I'll be looking over periodically to answer any questions. So I'm going to line up this. So this is the line that represents the middle and the front of the face. Then I can bring it around the rest of the head and figure out where my ear should actually go. Ears are really useful. Ears and eyes kind of like where they tell you where the middle of the head is. And that helps us figure out how the head is tilted. Like if you're looking up or down. This is not my usual eraser. adjust this jawline so it goes behind the ear, and then draw the rest of the head. So I'm going to bring this around, and then I'm usually pretty lax on the rest of the head, on the skull part, because I will just probably end up covering it in hair. Like this. You can always add more hair and it'll still look okay. So it's always better to have like bigger skull, because you can always just put more hair in there and cheat all of it, cheat all that. Oh, look, I guess this is Vin or Sabrio or something now. I'm just putting in suggestions of some kind of cloak that she's wearing. Now, this is not where I wanted it to be on my painting. It is just kind of randomly on the canvas. So I'm gonna fix that and make it more of a centered portrait. Whoops, forgot to screen share because I'm a genius. I am super tired, FYI. Yeah, so this is our, it's gonna do. That is also not where I wanted it to be on the screen. There we go. Okay, so now to actually start painting. So first thing I'm going to do is pop in a kind of a value into my background. And I'm going to use the gradient tool to kind of create a bit of lighting for it. I want that to be lighter. And basically, this is what's my canvas color is going to be. And that helps me with adjust all of the values and tones in the rest of the painting. Basically, when you're painting, all of the values and colors are relative to one another. So the way that the brain interprets stuff is that we interpret things based off of whatever they're next to. So if you put a really light color next to another really light color, then you're going to be reading one of them as darker, unless they're like exactly the same, because our brains are constantly comparing colors to the colors that are around them. So right now I am doing a kind of like basic value structure. So I'm using this lasso tool to select large areas of my image. And then filling them in. Sometimes I just do Control-Shift-B and then I just fill the whole thing in black and then use this hue saturation lightening and dark to lighten and darken the different parts of the image. Now I don't want to go all the way to, even though she has black hair, I don't want to go all the way to full black right now, because that means that I won't be able to go darker later. So I'm going to just go for something that is dark relative to the background color that I have here. gonna make a new layer for her skin because that is going to be um, a large portion of the image. And I want to work on the hair and the skin separate. I want to be able to work on each one of them without um, editing the other because like, there's going to be some overlap here in the where her bangs are. And so if I want to change the shape of the bangs, don't want to like mess with the skin. So I'm gonna fill this one in with white and then use that same technique, except this time I'm making it darker because I don't want it to be at the brightest white. I want it to be somewhere midway and that so it's lighter relative to her hair because she has pale skin relative to her dark hair. And it's still lighter than the background. But this is actually pretty far from pure white, meaning that I'll be able to add lighter highlights in later. And I'm going to use an eraser to tighten up my super messy outlines. And I'm going to drop this down, lower the opacity on my initial outlines so that I can see the shapes. And so like here, I'm missing a bit on the chin, so I'm going to sample the gray color that I took and then paint the outline of this shape in such a way that it reads better. Like I need to be able to read it when I turn off the line art. I'm not gonna be too fussy with this because it's a demo, but it's a demo and I only have like 50 minutes. I do want I want the face especially to be cleaner for this demo. So this is also where I would like kind of find some areas to put in that are not so clean. So every time that I fill in a shape with the lasso tool, right, it's going to give me this really hard edge because I'm just drawing a shape and filling it in. So for softer areas, I'm going to pick a soft brush. Let's take a look. This looks good. Yeah, that's fine. And this is actually not a brush that I'm super familiar with, so bear with me. And I'm actually going to use the brush set to manually paint in some areas. And basically, because I'm doing this manually, it's going to look a lot more painterly, a lot more messy. See, the color is already being applied in such a way that it isn't one flat color. And so I'm going to start off with with this small brush to get these areas of detail. The detail meaning like there's a lot of variety in the edge here of the hood. So because as you see, it has like this lump. I just want to keep that line a bit tighter. So that it reads. But out here, like, I want it to be nice and painterly and just kind of like, so it has that nice, like, faded edge on it. What is this? this is me just grabbing brushes at random at this point. And I find like this kind of like initial like experimental uh, kind of like blobbing in shape is a great way to understand what my brush textures are. So next thing I'm going to do is use a mask to, actually no, I'm going to reverse this. So I'm going to put her hair over her skin. And then I'm going to use a mask, so like this little dude right here, to paint back in. Basically, I'm going to hide any of the areas where her skin would be over her hair. So I'm making sure I'm painting on this mask. So it's basically like a layer on top of the actual art layer. And then I'm going to paint away So what I'm actually doing here is basically painting something that hides what's on this layer. So if I were to take another color and draw here, then the part that has been masked away does not show up. And obviously I have missed some stuff. So I will do this. Yeah. And to basically prevent me from being able to draw out the face, I'll use this, which is lock transparency. So with lock transparency, it doesn't let me go outside of the edges of what is already on this layer. So next thing I'm going to do is start putting, now that I have like these kind of base values, so I can read the separation between hair, skin, and outfit, I am going to start putting in, I'm going to clean this up, but then I'm going to start putting shadows in so that we can start seeing like the actual forms on your face. So in order to do this, I'm going to create a new layer and then turn that layer into a clipping mask. So basically this means that anything that's on, that I draw on this new layer is only visible when there is something opaque beneath it. So if I want to paint on her skin, I can, and it does not paint over onto her hair. In order to establish the core shadows, I'm going to, again, use the lasso tool. Basically, I'm going to draw a big shape that represents the shadow falling on the skin. So this way, when I fill it in and match it to the skin tone, now she has a core shadow on that side of the face. So now when we turn off this layer, we can see the edge where the form, the shape of her skull turns away from the light, which is, I'll draw in the light so that you know where it's coming from. This way, the sun. So we can see where the edge of her face is. Now I'm also going to add a couple more. So this is where the eye sinks in. This, by the way, is a great place to use reference if you have it. Time being bad. And the focus here is on wherever there will be shadow. You see like how I'm drawing basically across a bunch of a lot of the shapes. Like I'm not even like I don't make any distinction here between the lips, the nose, and the mouth, um, because we're going to be doing that basically later. So yeah, now we see kind of like where her features would be. We're going to do the same exact thing on her hair. Mask. I'm going to change this shape a little because I don't think it's working. And it's just straight up decided I want more of that dark. Just straight up paint it in. Some detail there. Basically, I'm using the eraser and the brush to just shape this shadow. So that it reads as the shadow on the hair. I'm gonna add some like little touches here and there as well. Like this is kind of where you want to just nail down all of your core and cast shadows, basically the big shadows that help define what the like what the object looks like. So like now that I removed the line art, you can actually kind of see the face right now. And then I'm gonna do it again on here. Gonna be much rougher with this one. Just gonna take a brush, sample that color, darker, and then put it in manually so that I get that nice texture from having used a brush instead of having used a lasso. Yeah, a little more here. Okay, so I want to kind of unify everything so much that I like paint on the background. So at this point, usually I would like um, probably add in even further, like basically I'll repeat this shadow process a couple times using progressively darker and darker shadows. Um, but because we're running out of time, I'm gonna actually start writing the color. Um, so for color, usually I'll start off by um, with local color. So I'll use Control Shift U to open up the hue saturation panel. Control Shift U is to saturate. Basically, by checking colorize, I can adjust the base color of whatever object, um, whatever object I have selected. And basically, because I already drew out those various shapes, then no matter what color I select, it's going to read as being the shape itself is going to remain. So if I want a warm light source with a cool shadow, I can kind of actually just stay right here, because by making the light part of her skin warmer and leaving the dark part of her skin gray, then the gray automatically looks cooler, more blue than the warm part. And so I don't do that much change. Then for her hair, I'm gonna do the same exact process. I want, and yeah, sure, why not? Oh, she's right. So right now, as I have it, the light is like super harsh, like the shadows that it's creating are super sharp, and I don't necessarily like that. So I'm gonna use this as a chance to soften shadows. So things that are like rounded surfaces are going to be turning away from the light. I'm going to be softer. So I'm gonna like cheeks. So what I'm doing here is I am softening that edge where that shadow would fall. And that kind of shows that the cheek is gradiating away. It's a nicer shade. The ball of her nose would also be softer. It's pretty subtle at this point because of how harsh the lighting situation is. If you were to go for a much more ambient situation, then you'd probably be erasing back a lot more of this, or just lightening the difference in how dark the shadow is versus uh, how light the light is. Like in a lighting situation like that, it would be much more the value range would be much more similar. So like this is the underside of the eye, so it'll be softer than the nose cast shadow, because this is just like the shadow falling from the nose onto the side of the face. But this is actually a turning of the turning of the skull. Let's see, what's next? So now, basically, after coarse shadow, I'm going to do what I call ambient occlusion, which is like, basically these are parts where two objects are so close together that no light can get in. So again, I'm going to make a new clipping mask on top of where the shadow is and start working on ambient occlusion. I'm going to get it, take the shadow color and go even darker. This is why I was like, don't use like super dark shadows starting off, so that you have even more room to go further. So like places that are going to be super dark would be like the inside of the eyeball, or the inside of the clip, where the eye is. What is up with this? This is not the color I wanted. Is it though? It could be a blend mode. So like a lot of the, I think this is a weird brush. I don't like it. That's better. So for fine details, it's actually very close to just doing like the line art. The occlusion, because it's like, it's the darkest part. So basically that's where our brain actually forms lines in our real world stuff that don't exist. Because lines don't exist in the real world. So I'm also going to ignore like little details like the like surface details like the eyebrows right now, because I'm going to end up painting them on later when I'm focusing more into color. Right now I'm just focusing on the actual like three-dimensional form of the formed by the lights and darks. So it's like basically like the term is like follow the light. So basically you're just looking for areas where things are super dark because they're folding together. Pop in a little on the chins so that I like, know what's going on. Then I'm going to adjust this shadow to include her head as well. Going back to that like main core blue shadow. So now, because I'm gonna shift this into a warmer tone so that it's like doesn't clash with the rest of what's going on. I use a lot of this like tone shifting stuff to like kind of create color. All right, so basically what I have here is enough for me to start putting in more colors. So I'm going to use something relatively soft to kind of like create some color zones on the face. Now that I have my value structure, so like I have the shapes, I can finally focus on the color. The eyes, I'm going to go for more desaturated. And this is on a whole new layer above. Above everything I just did. Oh, that's my computer telling me to take a goddamn break. There we go, after this demo. And so for color, I'm gonna take I want to make her cheeks a little and her lips a bit more red. So I'm going to sample the color that I have for skin and then use these sliders to create a darker, warmer version. So like I'm using this little doohickey right here to show like how does this color compare to the one that I sampled and it's immediately under it. And so that way when I put it on, it doesn't look super off. Because all color is relative, so you always have to constantly compare it to what you were putting down before. I'll add some of this pink that I've selected into the areas that make it look more alive, where there's more blood flow. And up here, where the light is hitting, I'm going to put in my highlights now. So I'm looking for something that is brighter than base skin tone that I was using as sampling. So I'm going to put this on yet another clipping mask, and then use this to put those highlights in places where the light will reach. Note, I am generally highlights should be quite sparing. So the nose is a sharp highlight because she has a sharp nose, but the chin, she has a soft chin, soft brow bone. So these are going to be much more diffuse highlights than collarbone as well. Spraying. Well, it's kind of got a face here. Oh, she needs more hair. Back at the color. I really need to organize my brush library. But like, basically by using the soft brush to control the shape, I can create a blurred edge here. Gives me a bit more, helps bring the focus to where the sharp edge is here, which is down here, where her actual face is. But yeah, at this point, basically, I would probably start painting just completely over what I was doing before. So I would get rid of this and then go in. And basically painting would just be taking a softer brush and adjusting any of the shapes. So I sample here, I'm like, oh, I want her nose to be thinner down here. So I sample this shadow color and then I paint in that shadow color and I'm changing the edges and the size of that shadow shape in such a way that um, the nose reads a little better. I'm cleaning up this highlight shape here. Basically, I'm working with all of these colors that I've already put down on the canvas and just adjusting the shapes at which they form. It's like this one's a bit too blobby here, so I'm gonna sample everything else around it and make it a bit rounder to showcase the ball of the nose a bit better. And this brush you see has a feathered edge, so it's really good for those softer areas. And since the nose is really fleshy, I want to put in some kind of transparent light. So when light passes through objects that aren't completely opaque, then sometimes we'll be able to see the interior color of the object. So in this case, there's a lot of blood flow in like the nose. So we have this kind of translucent light down here. It's also light bouncing off of the other skin, picking up the warm colors of the skin and bouncing that back as well. Yeah, but like basically the whole thing is if you start off with a strong enough understructure, then the rough work, the rough rendering quality will not affect what's going on underneath. So a lot of concept artists, like, they don't do finished paintings. They do stuff that's like really rough, like this, and then they hand it in to their AD, and it's like, hey, anything need to be changed? Because as you're refining and going, then you can like fix little things here and there. See, like this round circle doesn't follow the shape of the nose. This, where the nose meets the nostril meets the side of the face, I'm going to, you guys also see have to watch me paint it. Gonna soften that a bit because that's a point of ambient occlusion. So two surfaces meeting, and it's really hard for the light to get in to that tiny skin fold. Preserve the shadow here. It's about 2 minutes left, so yeah. You should be able to paint a character if you're a professional. You should be able to do it in about 6 hours. Like in a background, I think you can, depending on the level of complexity, anywhere between like 1 to 3 a day. That's the amount of work that you'll be expected to do at a studio. I'm actually slower than studio requirements because this is not my job. So when I charge freelance rates, I don't do very well. But that's why I have a day job. That is also very awesome. And I will be speaking about that day job later today. So if you want to learn about trading cards, art commissioning for TTRPGs, come watch those panels later today. And so on another window, I have this thing called the Navigator, which is a, oops, let me show it to you. So basically this is always a kind of zoomed out view of whatever I'm working on to make sure that whatever minute changes I'm making read on well on the final item. Right? Yeah, it takes me about 3 hours to paint a face. So this is kind of like the bare bones of where I would start. And yeah, that's all I really have for y'all. I hope you have a good flight of Foundry Con. And yeah, hope you're learning a lot. Chat.